Alright, I've loaded up my little container here, and this is going to be my first attempt at making biochar from mushroom bedding. And it's packed in there pretty well. It's all nice and crumbled already. Can you and should you turn mushroom bedding into charcoal? I mean, those questions are not actually as interesting, I don't think, as is there a point? Is there a point to turning mushroom bedding into charcoal? Because pretty much any organic matter can be turned into charcoal. That's not really the question, right? There actually is a very good reason to turn mushroom bedding into charcoal. Specifically, turning charcoal into biochar, you have to crush it, right? All the guidelines out there about turning charcoal into biochar says crush it down into, depending on who you talk to, finer particles, rice-sized particles, or sand-sized particles, or even finer, powder-sized particles. And that's fine. Let's go ahead and crush our charcoal into smaller pieces. But if you think of it, that's 2 extra steps that you have to think about. So specifically, the crushing process is not straightforward. People do all kinds of different things. They run over it with their car, put it in their walkways, feed it to their animals, put it in their animal bedding so that the animals crush it with their feet. People grind it with wood chippers. There's all kinds of different things that people do to crush their charcoal, but it's a process every time. It's not straightforward. The feedstock that you feed into mushroom bedding is typically already pre-composted and pre-crushed. You have manure, cow manure, horse manure. That's all been crushed by the digestive tract of the horse or the cow. You have crushed grains. You have crushed and shredded straw and hay, wood chips. All these things are basically broken down for you ahead of time. You started with a broken down feedstock to begin with. The mushrooms then came in with all the mycelium. They come in, they rip all that stuff down into even finer pieces. So by the time the mushrooming process is done, you pick up that mushroom bedding and it's fine, it's gritty, it's all broken down already. And you literally cut out 2 really challenging steps. It'll all just be ready to go once it comes out of the pyrolysis process. So this video is an exploration of what that process looks like, how well it's actually working to accomplish those goals, as well as a couple little post-production things that I wanted to explore. So once this chars, it should be ready to go. I won't have to do any crushing and crumbling because it's already really fine pieces. So let's do this. Okay, so it is smoking. Not sure how well it's showing up on the video. So you definitely see the gas cranking out of there now. You know what I think? Let me turn my headlamp off. Maybe we can see better. Yeah, now you can see it better, huh?
There's a little over there.
Yeah, you can really see the gas coming out strongly in the back right. See how it's like a blowtorch.
It's like...
I resettled the container back down right on top of the coals. Those coals are freaking really, really hot. So what I'm mostly concerned about is trying to get it burned all the way through the center of the mushroom bedding. And I think the heat in there is high enough to where it'll be able to get all the way through into the center and it won't just burn around the edges. It's time for the big reveal. Now, I have to be honest, I took a sneak peek already, so I kind of already know what it looks like. But here it is. So this turned out similar to what I was thinking. It definitely charred. It's very fine, falls apart super easily. What I haven't seen is whether the center got charred, so let's check the center. Center looks good. It seems a little bit brown, so I'm not entirely sure that this is 100% charred. But I mean, this is definitely charcoal. I mean, look at all that fine little stuff in there. So this is exactly what I was hoping it would turn into. Let's see how much the chickens like it. You just smelled it. Yeah, there's a good deal. Yeah, that's black. That is black stuff. That is right there for sure. See if I can get bit of lettuce so you can see how fresh it is. Yeah.
Go ahead, guys. Taste it. Yeah, there you go. You got it. Yeah, you can eat it. Go for it. Don't be afraid. There you go. You got it.
All right, so this is empty, and I'm going to go ahead and weigh the container. I'm not going to tear out the scale, so the scale's teared empty right now. And so this is 596 grams empty. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this up, and I'll weigh it again full, and we'll figure out how much is in there, and then we'll weigh it again once we're done with the burn. All right, so I filled up full of fresh mushroom bedding. Let's go ahead and weigh this. I think it was 596, and now it's 1496, so that's pretty much exactly 900 grams, if I'm remembering the number right. So 596 versus 1490. All right, so this is my fourth burn. I've teared out the scale. So it's got 0. And now we're at 1123 grams. So is it just under 1500? Now it's just over 1100. So about 380 grams of lost weight. So a lot of that's going to be moisture, water weight. Here's a look at the burn. Looks pretty good. Some ash. Not any more than any other burn.
Oh, they give you a free before.
That shows that this lighter stuff really is burned all the way through. It's lighter, but it's not because it's unburned. It's lighter because it's, I guess, more ashy. I don't know. Lighter one. Crack it open. And it's all black in the middle. So, I'm getting a complete burn. I can tell. I think that's a mushroom.
Kids can totally decorate it with the ones that we have already. But I'm gonna get more. I meant to go today, but.
Okay. Here's my little collection. We'll add this on there. Oh yeah, look at that dark stuff. Very nice. This is my inoculation strategy. Little duck pond here, and of course, ducks are super messy. First thing they want to do when they get into a little puddle of water is just poop. And so pretty much instantaneously this pond gets filled up with nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, all the good stuff. And so I'm going to let them swim around in their pond, and then every day I'll bring out the bucket of biochar, charcoal, and I'll dump it in here, mix it around a little while, let it sit for a while, and then I can take it out to the garden and dump it in the garden, where it will become a permanent part of the garden, feeding it nutrients all season long. Coming through. Yep, still not cool. It's hot. Filled the duck pond full of duck manure with charcoal. And so this is all going to be charged now, and I can put this out into the garden for next year. Now the question becomes, how do I do that? In answering the question, should we create charcoal out of mushroom bedding? What qualities does the mushroom bedding have when we put it in the soil? The charred mushroom bedding, when we put it in the soil. And for that, there's really no telling, right? Because charcoal is this really kind of mysterious substance. So we're really just beginning to understand kind of the science behind biochar selection and feedstocks, pyrolysis temperatures, grain size, electrical conductivity. All these different questions still exist around biochar and how to use it to accomplish a given goal, right? What pore size does your soil have? What pH does your soil have? What nutrient availability does your soil have? What did you inoculate your biochar with? What are you trying to accomplish with your plants? What is your constraint? Is it a phosphorus constraint? Is it a nitrogen constraint? Is it a water retention constraint? All these different variables are going on at the same time. And how you use biochar in such a wide array of different scenarios is not at all obvious, especially because the different feedstocks, the different temperatures, the different grain sizes, the different inoculation methods, all these different things factor into how effective the biochar is actually going to be when it's in your soil. So just to give you a sense of this, I've got this book, I read it this winter, Gardening with Biochar by Jeff Cox. And it's super basic, pretty basic introductory type of book. You can get it, I got it at Barnes & Noble. But it has some nice diagrams in here. So here it's got phloem vessels, and it shows how trees have these different vessels that they use for moving nutrients through the tree, whether it's moving nutrients out to the leaf tips or whether it's moving nutrients up and down between the roots and the stems. And so it's got these diagrams here, and that's when you're making wood biochar, when you're making wood charcoal, this is the feedstock that's going in. So when you make that charcoal, all that different pore space that you've charred is going to create all these amazing different places for water to get in there and be retained in the soil, right? So this might be really good for water retention. You can see under an electron microscope, here they've got cedar, sycamore, and yellow pine biochar. So here is cedar, and you can see here is, what is this? Here's sycamore, and here is, this must be yellow pine right here. And all three of those different feedstocks have very different pore and cell structures. So each of them is going to have a different effect on the biochar and how it interacts with your soil, how the microbes get on with it, and the types of nutrients that it holds on to. So basically, you're seeing this wide open array of different variables that we're really just beginning to understand how this all sort of works in the real world. And so where does mushroom bedding fit into all this? Because if we have all these different variables that we're sort of wrestling with and trying to figure out how all these different variables factor into how the biochar actually functions in our soil, do we just have to read a bunch of studies to figure out how this mushroom charcoal is gonna work in our soil? Should we try it out on some plots? Should we, what should we do? And to me, the answer is actually pretty simple. The answer is diversity. We don't just use mushroom biochar. We don't just use wood chip biochar. We use all the different biochars, whether it's almond hulls or pistachio hulls or wood chips, coniferous wood chips or hardwood wood chips or leaf charcoal or mushroom charcoal or manure charcoal. There's no end to the different types of charcoal out there that we can use. All of them are going to have a different structure. All of them are going to offer benefits. And so the solution to me is pretty simple. Just take it all, mix it all together. And that way your soil's going to get at least, your soil's going to get certain types of biochar that it really works well with. And so the diversity basically gives you a baked in safety valve where you know that there's going to be certain biochars that work really well with your situation. And you're going to have some baseline level of success that you're going to basically bake in through using diversity. It may not be optimal, right? Having a whole bunch of different diverse charcoals mixed together may not give you the optimal, but it will at least give you a baseline level of usability. Cat's fighting. Ooh, that sounds serious. So as one example, as part of this mushroom bedding charcoal process, I decided to test the pH both pre and post pyrolysis. And so the charcoaling process, typically you'll start with the lower pH, meaning more acidic, and after the charcoal process, the pyrolysis process is done, you'll end up with something with a higher pH, so more basic. And just out of curiosity, I went ahead and I tested the pH for the bedding, and I compared that to the pH post pyrolysis. Those plants like a slightly acidic soil, so if you're adding in a bunch of charcoal, it can raise the pH to a range where you're going to tie up certain nutrients that the plants really need. Now these tests are highly unscientific. I actually bought a pH meter, but I can't find it. So I'll do some more pH testing later. But for now, the best I can do is these pH testing strips. So it's useful. It's just not super scientific. All right, now for a very unscientific test. I'm going to measure the pH of charcoal, this mushroom bedding charcoal, and the original mushroom bedding. So I'm going to kind of break these up so that they have a similar granularity. See, this is all broken up. This is just naturally how it comes out of the pyrolysis process. So all that lumpy stuff that went in, after it burns, it's no longer lumpy. So I'll break this up. And then I'm going to mix this with 1 cup of water. So this is 1 cup of charcoal, 1 cup of mushroom bedding. So I'm going to mix this with 1 cup of water. So then we're going to mix this all around, kind of crush it as you go. Mix up the charcoal and water. We wait 10 to 15 minutes and let all of the aqueous ions get suspended in the liquid. All right, so it's been 10 minutes. And again, this is super unscientific here. Okay, pull it out. Okay, so now we need to wait for 15 seconds. Okay, so it's been about 15 seconds. And now we're going to compare it to the pH colors. We're looking at the middle one. The middle one looks pretty neutral, right? Maybe a little bit on the acidic side. It's hard to tell with the light. Yeah, it's not super pinkish reddish. It's more of an orange, don't you agree? So we're looking at the middle square. I'd say it's pretty close to neutral. Now we'll do the same thing for the charcoal. And yeah, it definitely looks a lot redder. You want to wipe off that gook. Yeah, much redder. So where are we? Are we off the charts? Yeah, it definitely looks pretty red. So it looks like the pH is probably above 8. Let's do another one. And this time, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to filter the water. Prepare the middle square. Now that looks more neutral, doesn't it? Maybe like a 7.5, somewhere between a 7.2, 7.8. What do you think? Yeah, 7.8 seems pretty close. It's a little more red than the 7.2, don't you think? 7.2 is a little more orange. 7.8 is a little more red. So I think close to 7.8. Let's do one more. Okay, so it's been 15 seconds. Tap that off. See, now that looks a lot more red, doesn't it? Closer to like the 8 range, but it's confusing because the blackness of the charcoal in there, I think, is kind of messing with it. Definitely much more on the red side. So let's compare these all side by side. So this one's purplish, reddish, orangish. I don't know, this is highly inconclusive. Let's do one more of the mushroom bedding. Oh yeah, 6.6 looks pretty well spot on, don't you think? It's darker than 6.2, so 6.6. Definitely not in the 7 range. So yeah, so the mushroom bedding itself seems to be acidic, and then the charcoal is more alkaline. Another thing to think about with charcoal production is that the nutrient profile of the feedstock that goes into the pyrolysis will influence the nutrient profile of the finished charcoal. And so with mushroom bedding, that's actually a really nice feature because mushroom bedding is already a relatively complete sort of nutrient source. Compost, it has manure, it has grain, it has wood chips, it has all these different things that are already a really good compost. You could just use it in the garden as is. And so when the charcoaling process is complete, some of those nutrients are going to be bound up in the charcoal, and you'll get the benefit of having those nutrients in your soil. Now, mushroom bedding, the mushroom bedding that I get is right around a 7 pH, and that's by design. They actually put in a pH buffer into the bedding. A pH buffer is something that it works in both directions, where if the pH gets too low, it will bring the pH back up, or if the pH gets too high, it'll bring the pH back down. So pH buffer is something that kind of keeps the pH in a certain range. So they use gypsum as a pH buffer. And so by design, the mushroom bedding is already at a pH of about 7. So going in, it goes from a 7, and then based on our pH testing, it looks like it's somewhere in the 9 to 10 region when the charcoaling process is complete, which is not super high. That's a good thing, because if the pH is really high, you have to take action to bring that down, soak it in an acid like lemon juice or something like that, and bring the pH back down. But in this case, having a pH of 9 is not actually that high, because when you mix it in and inoculate it, it's going to bring the pH down some already. And then when you spread it across your field, it's going to be at a relatively low volume, so it's not going to influence the pH that heavily. So hopefully this is interesting and useful, gives you some things to think about. Thanks so much for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.